Hello, my fellow Americans. 'Tis I, the rumpled one. I attended the school board meeting Monday night. Pretty interesting meeting. One of the items was they were going to have a little review of the mandatory drug testing policy for students who participate in extracurricular activities. Well, I walked into the room after they said the Pledge of Allegiance, and I noticed there was about, maybe 24 parents, mostly mothers there. I thought, this looks interesting. So by the time they got around to that agenda item, they were going to just roll right through it, and one individual said, hey, wait a minute, aren't you going to allow discussion from the audience? And they're like, well, no, but in the rules they say that, audience can, discuss things at that time. So this gentleman made a passionate plea. I mean, he got worked up. He was emotional. He raised his voice. He almost had tears in his eyes because he felt that the high school experience of his children were diminished because of this, because he would not allow them to be subjected to drug testing. Now, I spoke to some people before the meeting, and actually I spoke to a high school student, and she told me that she was for it, and her father was for it. I found that interesting. And he said, well, he doesn't want kids being in class high or stoned or whatever, and causing a disruption. Well, another friend of mine said, well, hey, if they're high or stoned, they're going to be sitting back all mellow. But so I thought that was kind of interesting. But it just seems to me that these school board members just didn't get it quite right, because after the first gentleman spoke, they asked if there was anybody else, and so I looked around the room and nobody else was getting up there, so I raised my hand and I got before the board. Now remember, this year I am part of the budget committee for the school board, so I get to work with these people. So I asked them, I said, you start these meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. The real Pledge of Allegiance, the one that, talks about God, not the politically correct one. And I asked them, I said, do you understand what those words mean? Or do you just recite them? Do you actually believe in the oath, the pledge that you're taking? He said the last line, with liberty and justice for all. How can you subject the kids to this if you're pledging for liberty? I mean, it's just really preposterous. And I said, that should be the yardstick for all governing bodies. Are they increasing and protecting our individual liberty, or are they diminishing it and taking it away? I said, it's simple. I then went on to ask them, I said, you guys are leaders. Well, you should lead by example. The school board should take a drug test, and the administrator should take a drug test, and the teacher should take a drug test. And I said, but we know that's not going to happen. So my question is, why would you subject the kids to something that you won't do yourself? I mean, that's hypocrisy. That's tyranny. And I let them know it. And then I thanked them. But it was funny because the other gentleman, like I said, he was just really passionate. And usually I'm one of the people that do that. But this time I was kind of like sitting back, calm, cool, and collected. And they didn't really make any changes. But one of their complaints was, by the athletic director, was saying that the parents just aren't participating. Well, the other gentleman said, well, why don't you think they participate? They tell you things and you guys don't listen. You just do what you want. And I pointed out, I said, when you voted on this, it was unanimous. I said, there's something wrong with that picture. Who up here represents the people that don't want it? I said, are you just so homogeneous, that you all think alike? Nobody represents? I mean, you're just some little group? Once again, it's just preposterous. Then the meeting went on, they rolled some more business, and I was wondering why all these moms were sitting in the back. Well, then when it came to the open comments from the audience, this one lady raised her hand and she came up and she had written a letter and she was reading from the letter. And it was very passionate because here in Mayberry, we have an elementary school that's situated in the inundation zone, and in the event of an earthquake, it has a 100% probability of collapsing. It's been studied by engineers. And she was very upset that she had been sending her kids to this school since 2006, 8 years ago. That they've known about this problem, this situation for 8 years, yet they haven't informed the parents. And that, they let the parents send their children to a building that's basically unsafe. Because we don't know. I mean, during the earthquake could happen any time. And it was real interesting because she actually had tears coming out of her eyes. You could see her lips quivering because she really felt this. And another parent said that, school should be the safest place you send kids and not a death trap. And then another parent spoke up and said, we should be known as the town that took action and made sure disaster doesn't happen to our kids, rather than a town where, a couple of hundreds were kids were killed, during a building collapse during an earthquake. Well, it was funny because I was waiting to speak because I wanted to invite the school board and the audience to our prepper gathering this weekend because we're having a skills building session. And so I started off, I said, how many people in this room realize that there was a seismic event that occurred 191 miles to the west? It was a 5.1 earthquake in the middle of the ocean, right off our shores, 191 miles. I said, if that was a 9.1, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. So it's one of those things where a lot of people are paying lip service. But, there's one thing to read a book and sit around a table and talk about what you're going to do. It's another thing to get out in the wilderness and practice these skills that you may need, that may save your life, that may be the difference between surviving and not surviving. Oh, it's a warm day out here and the bees are out, and the wasps. So anyway, that was the essence of the meeting. But you see, my fellow Americans, the main point is we have elected officials that treat us like children. It's just like they don't want to tell us things. They don't want us to be scared. They don't want us to panic. They don't want us to be afraid. Well, you know what? The people that elected you are adults. And I believe we, the people, have a right to know. Don't be sitting on information because you're afraid we're going to panic. No. Let us decide what we're going to do with that information. It's not right that you have this information that could affect us or will affect us, but you don't give us the information so we can take the appropriate action or make the decisions and take appropriate action. And that, my fellow Americans, is just tyranny. That's something that needs to stop at all levels of government, local, state, federal. We've got to get this thing. This government needs to be transparent. If there's a problem, no more cover-ups. Let's expose it. Let's get it fixed. But you see, when we've got elected officials that all they care about is getting elected and staying elected, staying in office, this is the type of government we have. And until we, the people, just decide that, you know what, you had your 2 years, your 4 years, your 6 years, you didn't do a good job, you're out of there. And we, the people, just need to adopt that and adapt that strategy when we go to the voting booths. I mean, if you know the name and they've been around, well, it seems like in politics, the saying that experience breeds bad habits is definitely true. So we need more inexperienced people like J0. You knew that was coming, didn't you, John? Anyway, my fellow Americans, once again, it is time to wake up and smell the tyranny.